In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate how to create labels and buttons before we actually begin our GUI programming. We'll also create a program, and I'll demonstrate how to, in fact, click on certain buttons and have the canvas do some added functionality to us. Okay, so various techniques that we learn in this particular lesson. So let's jump right in. I'm going to begin by importing our tkinter. So import tkinter. Let me go ahead and quickly save this first, and we're going to call it label.py. Great. So next I'm going to say from tkinter import the ttk, and once the ttk is imported, we can then do our root equals ttk dot style. Okay, so first I'm going to show you a couple of ways we can do styling for our button and the label as well. So for style, I'm going to have the map, and on this map I'm going to have our T button, place a comma after T button, and then the style of the button, right? So I need to explain and define my foreground and background options. So for example, my foreground, in this instance, what would happen, right? So I need to put this in a list and simply say when the button is pressed, and then define the color, right? So what happens? So it's the red, for instance, and then I can define the state color as well. So once I hover over this, the color is going to change to blue. Same thing. Next is my background. So my background is going to equal once it's pressed, and let's see, I'm not going to have my background do anything because I'm going to leave it disabled. So I'm going to leave it disabled, and then use the black color and define my active state as well. So active would be the color, let's say white. Great. And close my parentheses, and let's fix the error. We need a parentheses right after the blue color here. Great. And not this one. Perfect. Alright, next I'm going to define the color button, right, or the color of the button itself. So I can do color or colored btn equals ttk button, and then put the text in there. Text is going to be equal, this is something like click me, and of course the style equals c dot t button, and then use the pack to the root main loop. Okay, so far just a simple button. Let me save it, run it, and line 7 is basically our background color, which is fine, but I need to also do the loop here again. Close the main loop. Alright, great. And this time let's go back to line 7 here. So what am I missing? I am missing a comma here. Perfect. And the reason why we see in line 5 where it says style not defined, right? So let's go back to our line 4, for instance. The root is in fact not ttk.style. This will be defined in the style. So I'm going to put this under style. So my style is going to be equal to ttk.style, and then my root is going to be tkinter. Dot tk. There we go. Alright, let's run through the code one more time. So we imported our module, we defined the root, and we defined the style. Okay, let me use it the same naming convention. And once we've defined the root and style, then we actually created the style.map, and then we define the foreground and background, the button itself, and then we close the loops. Now it should work fine, and it does. Great. So here's our simple button where you can simply notice as I hover over this where it says click me, it changes the color to blue, both the background and then the text as well. If I click on it and hold the mouse button, notice it changes the color to red because that's my foreground color, and the background is black, which is essentially the border area of this button. So this way you can actually create some hover effects of your buttons in Python. Okay, so I just quickly wanted to run through the label and button because these will be useful as you get more into the GUI programming in Python. All right, next I'm going to close this. We're going to run another program. We're going to create another program, and in fact let me get rid of this and start fresh. So from tkinter import asterisk, define my canvas width and height. Here I'm actually going to create maybe a couple of buttons, and then once you click on a button, another canvas would appear. Okay, so I'm going to create all of this. So my first canvas height is going to be 100, and my canvas width is going to be 50. Start my class app and simply do the definition here, init self master, and then create my widths and use the height. So my width equals canvas width and the height equals canvas height. The frame is going to equal the frame, then just do the master and do the same thing. The width equals canvas width and the height equals canvas height, and use the pack method, frame.pack. And next I'm going to do the self button, right? So I'm just going to do the self button equals, define my button here. So I'm going to do frame, and what do I want on this button? So maybe text would be equals close, and then my FG, which is the foreground color, let's say I'm going to keep it red. The command equals frame dot quit. Move this aside. So after quit, I'm going to do the self button dot pack and side equals left, and then self slogan equals button. Get my frames in there, and then this time right next to frame I'm going to have my text, and here I'm going to say, let's say click me one more time, and my foreground color is going to equal blue, for instance. The command equals self dot write underscore slogan method. Okay, and then let's do the self slogan pack, and this will be on the left side as well. So side equals left. Great, continue on. Let's do our self button dot, and now since we have the buttons and the frame earlier, here we're going to do the config, right? So self button dot config, and I'm going to do height equals 2, for instance, and also the width equals 20. And this again you can change later on once you run the code and it shows up on the screen. If you want to change these sizes, we can always do those. And next I'm going to do the same thing, but this is going to be for the self.slogan config, and I'm just going to copy it so it's easier. And next I'm going to get my definition, and this is going to be right_slogan self, and finally do the print. So I'm going to say something like welcome to Python advanced programming. Alright, great. So it looks good so far. Once we have our text, next I'm going to define the root here. So root is going to be TK, and I may want to give a title to this canvas top label. So I'm going to say, let's say root dot title equals just hello world, app equals app parentheses root, and then my main loop comes in. So root dot main loop. Great. All right, so in this instance we just created a class app, and we defined the frame areas, the self button, and of course if I need to correct the spelling right off the bat here, slogan, and then we have our button, did the definition, and then of course our root. So I'm going to save it, run it, and let's go to our line 9, and of course it doesn't like the indent, right? So let me just go ahead and move this, indent it a little, do my indentation correct, because that's part of our definition. Great, let's try it. And canvas height is not defined, all right, because I have width and width. That's nice. So I'm just going to change this to height. Can't have two widths. I need to have my width and then my height. Perfect. And this time when I run it, box appears. So we have the TK canvas and a couple of buttons, right? So one button on the right says click me, and the other one says close, right? And the close of course is in red, and click me is in blue, and that's the foreground color. So if I were to obviously click the right button, I'll get a message that says welcome to Python advanced programming, and I click on close. It's going to close the window as well. So this way we can create, in fact, buttons which allow us to not only display text, but also we can use buttons for other functionality as well. Before I end this lesson, I'm also going to create a counter, okay? So I'm going to show you that once we click on the close button, another canvas window should appear, and a counter will start counting seconds, okay, for instance. So let me quickly do this. So I'll just put a comment here. So this code is for the timer. So do the import tkinter as tk. Set my counter to 0. Do the def counter label. Once I start the definition, I'm going to do counter equals 0, and then another def within this counter, and this will be my global counter, and it's going to add n plus 1, right? So it'll be something like counter plus equals 1, and do my label.config and get my text in here. So the text is going to be equals str counter, then do my next label, which is going to be after, the after method, and it'll be 1000, and keep counting, and of course do our count. And next I'm just going to do the root. So root equals tk dot tk, And my title for this goes in here. So I'm going to write counting seconds. Once I give it a title, just define a label quick. The label is going to be tk.label, and then have a root. And the foreground color could be any. I'm just going to say dark green. And of course, our label.pack method. All right, great. So the last part will be for the counter. So counter label, put label in the parentheses, and then get the button equals tk dot button. And what do I want? I like to have my root and then my text equals stop. Of course, I need to define the width of this. And let's say I'm going to keep the width of this button to maybe 55, and then give it a command, right? So command equals root dot destroy. So I'm going to close it, and then button dot pack, and end it up with a main loop, right? So it's going to be root main loop. Great. So now in this code, we not only have our two buttons that initially appear, but once we click on the close, another pop-up canvas is going to appear with a button that's going to say stop. The width is going to be 55, and then it's going to start the counter within that canvas. So let me run this. Here's our first couple of sets of buttons, click me and close. Of course, if I click on click me button, it says welcome to Python Advanced Programming. If I click close, perfect. Our next window appears, and here's a counter that's counting seconds, and then my stop button is also here. And the width is 55. I can of course make it smaller if I choose to do so. Okay. So for instance, if it's too long, I can make it, let's say 35. I'll run it again. Click on the close button, and this time it's a little better. Of course, I can play around with the height and width of the labels and the buttons as well. So in this lesson, I wanted to demonstrate different ways where you can create not only the hover effects in Python GUI programming, but also different ways to create labels and then your buttons as well. So I hope this helps. Practice, and let's move to the next lesson.